Can you still taste the freshness of those fruity desserts that used to cool us down each summer? No? Don't worry, we're about to refresh your memory with 20 delights that time sadly left behind. The list kicks off with Bananas Foster's, the dessert that used the cheapest and most common fruit of all time. Bananas were served on top of ice cream, but wait, this was not just your typical ice cream sundae recipe. The real taste lay in the rum, butter, and cinnamon sauce that would be covering the scoop of vanilla ice cream with bananas. In terms of flavor, Banana Fosters were popular amongst young adults and parents who wanted a treat for themselves after serving ice cream on the dinner table. Yet the flavor was not its only attraction. People particularly noted how some chefs would add and ignite the alcohol during the sauce making. So, not only was this dish a joy to eat on every level imaginable, it was something you could really flex about if you made it well. Bananas Foster's had a really rich and vibrant flavor that just screamed feel-good comfort food. Truly, in that regard, even now that it is mostly a treat of the past, there are few desserts that compare. Now, if you were a serious home baker back in the day, like some people were, you might remember Spumoni baked Alaskas. We use the word serious because making this thing and doing it right was no joke. See, while it was not as flashy as setting rum alight like with the Fosters, it did have a lot of simple but dearly necessary things that could easily go wrong. Spumoni, to begin with, is a sherbet popular in Italian-American cuisine. Making a good sherbet was challenging back then. Topping that off with baked Alaska, an ice cream cake you had to make from scratch, could get even more challenging. Luckily, it was so popular people eventually got it right. Times like that are far gone now, though. And if you manage to find anyone who can make a proper one, contact us. Maybe lemon chiffon pies are not so popular in bakeries anymore, but once they used to be in the section of food magazines and people still remember how good they were. Do you ever fondly remember watching MasterChef contestants whip up lemon chiffon pies? Especially in the Australian version, which was broadcasted in the United States too. Lemons and more lemons. That is one idea that has a historically verified track record. In recent years, people have started to extract flavors from fruits without fully utilizing the fruits themselves. Delicious, airy lemon sponge cakes topped off with lemon-flavored meringue sounded like America was on to something, and we think it should never have been let go. For the life of us, some of the downfalls of these once household names make no sense. Guess we are not the only ones left wondering why this went away from family tables. Speaking of airy, Cherry Angel food cakes had a texture that could be best described to be as light as the clouds with a flavor that sent people further above to food heaven. Mouth-wateringly soft cakes with a soft yet rough crumb made this fruit dessert a go-to choice for many people. Angel food cakes had textures that did not make sense on paper, but did on the table. Top that with a cherry sauce made from scratch, or store-bought in case you just wanted it quicker, was perfection on a plate. People could not get enough of this dish wherever they went. Not a state you could point to that did not have at least some kind of fling with this culinary heartthrob. Most popular as something had at weddings or celebrations, this was not only a sweet dessert, but an even sweeter gesture. Maybe next time you have to go somewhere, you might consider an angel cake. Well, good luck finding a legit one, because we definitely could not in this day and age. So far, we have had some pretty tangy and sweet fruits, but let's go back to our roots with some country apple dumplings. Especially beloved in the South, they were a hit in most homes across America because of how easy and quick the idea was. A big fat reward to go with it made it a solid dinner plan on Sundays. Dumplings with apple fillings wrapped in pristinely soft dough with cinnamon. Honestly, when it sounds this good and people still say that imagining it doesn't compare to experiencing it, you know it was something special. At least a thing deeply special and a comfort food for a lot of people. America definitely had its fair share of baking phases on a national scale. During times like the 60s, these were just the perfect thing to make. Sad that you could not find one in bakeries nowadays like before. Peach cobbler is another all-time classic that got just as much love in the South and more than that in other states. No one out there can say they do not remember having a good peach cobbler. While it went out of fashion as far as being a family dinner table regular, it is not something that went extinct. On the flip side, No one can deny that it is not the hit it used to be either. Still, let's talk about what was rather than what is. See, the funny thing about Cobbler was that it could be different depending on where you were. In the South, it was more like a fruit-filled deep dish pie. In the East Coast, it was similar to a fruit filling inside a baking dish with jam and biscuit elements. Either way, you were in for one hell of a party. We just wish the festivity continued until today. Speaking of festivals and parties, Tipsy Cakes, as funny as the name is, were pretty popular at both. It does not take a genius to figure that one out, nor does it take one to see just how good sherry, brandy, and cake can be if combined. People went absolutely nuts over a good cake, and sometimes got buzzed rid of them too, depending on how much brandy they used, of course. And just between you and me, most people went over what the recipes suggested. Some states would use angel food cakes as the base and put 1 or 2 ounces of whiskey in there, fruit custard fillings, or if you wanted to complement the sherry, a vanilla cream filling were the go-to choices for most. Sadly, nowadays the concept is more or less lost, and even we had to dig deep for this one. This one is just as experimentative as adding alcohol to your cakes, but instead it is a mix of like 3 wildly different things, called a strawberry pretzel jello salad, ripe, juicy strawberries, a tantalizing summer treat along with crushed sweet pretzels with a jello layer. Sometimes more than one, the jello element actually worked along really well with the strawberry and pretzel combo. This is something our viewers may already be familiar with, as it remains a popular Sunday snack today. Plus, we know we always mention the crunch when it comes to stuff like pretzels, but it really was amazing. However, the idea of adding jello strips onto your perfectly good cream cheese strawberry pretzel salad is largely something pre-modern America. A lot of people would get the ick hearing about one of these. Maybe you did too. Similar to the jello experiment we just had are fruit cocktail gelatin models. Come on, everybody loves a good fruit cocktail, especially when it is as hot as recent days have been. But just like jello, fruit cocktail gelatin molds would not last long enough to be remembered. What time they did spend in America's food diary was definitely a unique one. Not a flavor you could easily describe today because, well, you could not easily find it. From some pretty early references to around the 70s, we can tell that it felt like a very cold, fruity drink that had a bubblegum flavor to it. Of course, not all gelatin molds back in the day tasted the same. America started preferring its whiskey neat and its coffee black and left imaginative thoughts like the fruit cocktail gelatin molds behind. A shame too, because in our opinion, they push the boundaries of what a good drink can be. Coconut cream pie is one that is simple and straight to the point. You have your typical baked pie crust, which is always a slice of food nirvana, and a creamy coconut filling. Top it off with your usual crackers, nuts, whipped cream, and all the other lovely choices of the 90s, and you had yourself a very easy Sunday banger. Coconut cream pies were not just popular with the home chef crowd. They dominated in the baking market, places across big states like New York and California. Often a really common sight at any bakery you would stroll by, really. Not on a stroll you would take today, though some families that kept a recipe in the bloodline may still indulge in it even past the 2000s. Simple does not just mean pie, it can also mean casserole, but this pineapple cheese casseroles were no simple take on the classic. Considered by many in the recent decades to be way too much and for good reason, it was widely a niche thing. We say it widely because there was the odd pineapple cheese casserole lover now, and then found in every state across America. We are not the only ones who think it is odd there were pineapple cheese casserole fanatics, because if you ask America a while ago what they thought of this dessert, they only dished out anti-pineapple sentiments. People were sick of pineapple being added to foods that were great enough on their own. Sandwiches, pizzas, and now casseroles might be food blasphemy. Put 2 and 2 together, and you can see why this did not last till today. Luckily, the masses' cries would be heard when a resurgence of banana pudding rocked America to its last cent. Bakeries were sold out left and right, people were making it every weekend, especially for the Super Bowl, and it was suddenly really popular with the Jewish. Banana puddings were something America forgot once before too, but it would always seem to keep coming back to it eventually. Sure as the sun would rise the next day, The next decade, at least 1 year, would be banana puddings. Who could object to the perfect mix of creamy banana-flavored pudding with slices of the fruit or whipped cream or both? Calorie-friendly is not on this one's resume, and honestly, when it tastes like that, fair enough. America seems to have moved towards one of its phases where it has forgotten again. Banana pudding does not enjoy nearly a quarter of that same love today. Grandmas would definitely like the next one we have up, the appropriately named Figgy Duffs. Really, this was just a boiled pudding that your nan would probably cook up every other weekend. Except one tiny fact which has to do with where it originated from explains how this simple recipe got to be known as Figgy Duffs. People would usually call raisins figs in Labrador, its birthplace, but in America people took that literally. A lot of people would actually use figs in the dish along with raisins in what was one savory but sweet dry fruit bag pudding. Caramel was also a really frequent complimentary choice that was either in the pudding or worked in using caramel crumbs. In theory, it sounds pretty fun, and we would definitely try it today if it was available. Prune Whip is something that was also common with housewives of the 70s who would be your grandparents today. 1. It was really quick and required nothing more than prunes and sugar. 2. It was delicious enough to get the whole family or neighborhood talking. Prune Whips were literally just prunes and sugar in double boilers blended together, then put on ice. What you had then was either a pudding-like dish you could eat on its own, or one absolutely incredible and out-of-the-box pie filling. You see why it got popular at family tables now, don't you? This dish's downfall, sadly, was just the growing irrelevance of things as time presses on. People moved on to other whips and mixes, even if the Prune Whip was great. Lemon bars are just like Prune Whips in the sense that the concept is an incredibly basic mix of two ideas we know make a great couple. In this case, it was the idea of a candy bar with a filling. You have your Snickers and your Mars to argue about why this is the only valid filled candy bar. Lemon bars were not something so hotly debated because people just kind of said, yeah, I need that. To them from the start. Lemon curd fillings in dessert bars, actually. Think of it like a lemon-flavored Mars. While they were an idea that clicked with the crowd from the get-go, they went out of fashion just as soon as they came onto the scene. At this point, we have had all kinds of pudding, so let's go full circle with plum pudding. Steamed instead of boiled this time around, the pudding was the base for a plum filling that just hit a very specific spot for folks. You know when something is sweet but kind of in a sour and bitter way, but it is still oddly refreshing and addictive to eat? Plum pudding is that to a T, and it was one very solidly cemented Thanksgiving treat. Just about a regular at any household table that time of the year. Now, you would not find it in places any time of the year, at least not easily. Pineapple. Upside-down cake was another affront to America's long-standing belief that pineapples are best enjoyed as they are. Remember the casseroles with the pineapples? Properly rejected from early on, they just made most 20 to 30-year-olds feel justified in their pineapple discrimination. Each time pineapples made a feature on any food's discography, sales went down. However, what they did not realize was that God made everything in pairs. This fruit would find its partner in a vanilla sponge cake with caramelized rings that even used the juice from the fruit. Infusing it into the sponge cake, it was a guilty pleasure for some and a certified delicacy for others. For us, it is definitely in our top 3 for what we would like to try from this list. Whether it gets its name from a boxing mule or a popular Civil War country tune, Shoefly Pies started out as one of Pennsylvania's earliest proper fusion food loves. Half pie, half cake, all parts delicious, this pie was made with molasses and usually known for its vivid sweetness. Often described as intense and sometimes too overbearing for the casual crowd, Shoefly Pies were a classic of the last century for sweet tooths around the country, especially in states like Wisconsin, Texas, and Georgia. Eventually, it started to spread to every end of America and became a name people would remember even recently. Not as many would remember still making it or eating a slice of a pie, though. Molasses, dark corn syrup, and brown sugar were a few ingredients that went out of style. Less of a full meal and more of a dessert snack, a cherry wink, not to be confused with a cherry wine or Hosier's song, were a dish that redefined what a cookie could be. Maraschino cherries that would grace perfectly crumbly cookies topped with crunchy cornflakes meant every box was ticked. Sensation and taste-wise, it was something America just had not experienced before, nor did people's imagination ever swing that way. Famous recipes for cherry winks can be found in the 1950s, so we are glad they swung eventually. Happiness is short-lived, and so were cherry winks, because by the 70s and 80s, America either went to healthier cookies or fatter and bigger ones. There was a swelling trend of cookie sizes becoming twice or thrice as big that did not fit the idea of a cherry wink. Ending the list with apples seems pretty poetic, but not just apples. We are talking about cranberry stuffed apples that were even better. Naturally, we would save arguably the best on the list for last. We believe this one is the best because in all factors we considered so far, whether it was affordability, how easy to cook it is, taste, uniqueness, texture, and more, this took the crown. Maybe not in every area, but as a whole, cranberry stuffed apples could not be baked. Purely a fruit dessert and nothing else, all you needed was some apples and cranberries. Then came the stuffing, and finally the baking. People would naturally add some other things to make it flow better, like using brown sugar or sprinkling cinnamon. As snacks go, it was healthy, delicious, easy, and cheap, which is why we cannot figure out why it stopped being popular. We just know we are sad it did. Think we should bring some of these desserts back in the home kitchen? If you do, give us a like and subscribe for more food history.